Welcome back, boxing fans. Today we're going to be talking about yesterday's tragic result and the impact that's going to have moving forward at the 154-pound division. A division that currently is one of the hottest divisions in boxing. At one time, 140 pounds was seen as a real deep division with a lot of great potential matchups. But that division obviously has fallen off. Quite a few fighters people were very excited about, disappointed. And now 154 and 168 have really started to grow and develop. A lot of good up and coming fighters, making fans very excited about the prospects of what potential fights we can get in the future. But we're going to discuss that and more today. So stay tuned, and I will see you in a minute. Welcome back. So yesterday we had Virgil Ortiz making his really junior middleweight debut. Obviously, he's had a few fights since his whole health issue at 147, which forced him to move up in weight. But this was the first time he was forced to legitimately make the 154-pound weight stipulation. Obviously, because of the interim WBC title, like we need another pseudo fucking email title, but there you are. WBC never fails to fucking deliver. But nonetheless, because of that, obviously he was forced to make the 154-pound division to fight Surrey Bolchuk. It was a fight that most people were predicting that Virgil Ortiz would win. People have been very excited about Virgil Ortiz, saw a lot of great things about him. He was a guy coming into this fight with a 100% KO ratio. But the one issue people were concerned about was his health and how his body really was at this point after obviously the near career ending health issues that he had that obviously stopped a very good fight from happening at 147. But nonetheless, he made weight, he looked good, the fight unfolded, it was a good card overall. And then, of course, we were not disappointed with the performance from both of these fighters on yesterday's card. I can't fathom how anybody, though, thinks that somehow Virgil Ortiz won 8-4. By thinking that Virgil Ortiz won that fight 8-4, it just shows that you're really just fanboying for Virgil Ortiz, and he's really the guy you want to win. And that's the only reason you could actually see a scorecard that lopsided, right? Really, because it's not as if Virgil Ortiz had a dominant performance. Anything to the contrary. He was a guy that literally was being dictated to the whole fight by Surrey Bolchuk, who was establishing distance with his jab and his right hand. When they did fight on the inside, it was because Bohachuk determined to go inside and go toe-to-toe with Virgil Ortiz. When he was on the ropes, it's because he backed himself into the ropes and was easily able to spin off and get off the ropes whenever he chose. Virgil Ortiz did not dictate, did not show ring generalship in that ring. At times was moving backwards, boxing like a boxer and mover off of his back foot using an ineffective jab at the times where he did that, because he is not a guy that moves backwards using his jab. So he really was fighting out of character. And because of that, I can't understand how people actually think he won 8 fucking rounds of that fight. I mean, delusion is a real thing. And we see it more here in the boxing world than we see anywhere. And I understand if you guys love Mexican-American fighters or just Mexican fighters and you want to support them. I get that. I'm cool. I feel you. But at the same time, you got to be fucking realistic and rational. The same way Golovkin was robbed in the first Canelo fight. The same way Kovalev was robbed in the first Andre Ward fight. The same way that fucking Lomachenko was robbed in the Devin Haney fight. Surrey Bolchuk was robbed in this Virgil Ortiz fight. If there was a draw, it wouldn't have been disappointing to the extent that it is now. He would have retained his title, and you would have thought, the judges just fucking obviously were biased. It was obviously a golden boy card, and obviously the A-side guy in this fight was Ortiz. So there's no surprise that they were leaning towards him. But to act as if he won the fight when he needed literally 8 rounds to win to 4, I can't understand that. And people get exposed in the 12th round. That really exposes their narrative because people say, oh, he had Bochuk hurt. he had Bochuk hurt. He had Bochuk hurt. Bochuk hit him with about 8 right hands in that round. Had the ref jump in to give fucking Virgil Ortiz a break because of tape that was loose. But really, it's because he caught 4 fucking straight right hands back to back to back to back. So then to say that somehow he lost that round, it makes me really question how you score fights and how I can believe anything you ever say when it comes to fucking talking about boxing at all. Because you don't fucking score ring generalship, right? Knockdowns don't matter. People are justifying it. Oh, those weren't real knockdowns. Those were slips. Those were clean punches landed, especially the first punch, because there was no fucking slip there. He said, oh, I tripped over his foot. But go look at the replay. Bochuk's foot was nowhere fucking even close. He got hit high in the temple. So, of course, he's acting like something fucking weird happened, because usually that's what happens when you get hit high in the temple. And as far as the short left hand that caught him and fucking made him slip, yeah, because he got caught in the chin and then his foot slipped from under him. Those were 2 very clean knockdowns. Was he hurt? Ooh, no. They were flash knockdowns based on clean, effective punching. But those were still rounds that Bochuk won and obviously was building up his lead over Virgil Ortiz. I mean, even in the first, I just can't see how people thought that Virgil Ortiz won 8 rounds. If you thought he won 7, I still wouldn't fucking believe you. If you thought he won 6, okay. Now I think, okay, so you're giving him most of the close rounds. But to give him 8 rounds, you gave him every single fucking close round imaginable. Also, you could say Virgil Ortiz is the email champion, because he's not a fucking champion. Funduro's the champion. Virgil Ortiz is still not a champion. This is the same Virgil Ortiz that literally left the WBO, where he was guaranteed a Bud Crawford WBO world title fight, to go chase the WBA regular title. Because this shows you, guys blatantly would choose to go for a title that is fucking not legitimate, doesn't mean anything, doesn't have any historical fucking connotations at all, just so they can duck Bud Crawford. I mean, this is the same thing Tank Davis has done for years and years. I mean, we saw the light heavyweight PBC guys do it, doing a round robin, all to duck the world champions at 175 pounds at that time. The PBC usually puts more value on regular and interim titles than any other fucking promotional company around, because they will label their fighters champions. They will market it that way, even though real boxing fans know that it's fucking smoke and mirrors, right? Same as Devin Haney and his email fucking WBC title. Lomachenko was the champion. Lomachenko didn't drop his title. Lomachenko was elevated by the president of the WBC. Was it a good move? Of course it wasn't. But he's the president. If he says this is how it's going to happen, you just believe what he says is true. And then the way it unfolded, it became a shit show, right? But Suleiman, all the rest of these sanctioning bodies, they are pieces of shit that fucking just ruin the sport of boxing and make it very difficult for hardcore boxing fans to take shit serious, right? I mean, you wonder why American boxing is disappearing. People are now mocking and ridiculing Turki Al-Sheikh in Saudi Arabia and Bud Crawford because that California card didn't do, I don't know how many pay-per-view numbers. I don't care, because it's irrelevant. I paid for it and I live in Taiwan. So I don't think they're counting all fucking things, maybe just American market. But literally, you were buying pay-per-view on DAZN worldwide. So I know it's not only 100,000 pay-per-view buys. Bullshit. But nonetheless, people are literally ridiculing and mocking Bud Crawford and Turki Al-Sheikh. I mean, who you should be mocking are yourselves, because you act as if somehow you guys control the sport of boxing, yet really all you're doing is weighing it down, cheating the fighters, cheating the sport, and cheating yourselves in the long term. I mean, if you can't support big fight cards like that, then why would Saudi Arabia invest any money in boxing in America? They might as well just continue to support fights in Saudi Arabia and the UK and countries that actually do support boxing. And all this shit now, And I mocked and ridiculed Turkey Al-Sheikh with his petulant behavior towards Canelo Alvarez. But when he doesn't want to work with Canelo, Tank Davis, Anui, and Tim Tszyu, it's not because he's fucking blackballing those fighters. It's because those fighters are putting on diva mentality type of personalities where they fucking don't want to do what's good for boxing. They don't want to do what's good for you and me. They want to continue to do what they've always done, which is fucking exploit boxing, get everything they want out of it while fucking not risking much. I won't say so much about Inui or Tim Tszyu to the extent, obviously, of Canelo and Tank Davis. Tank Davis, fucking the epitome of it. Canelo, obviously, that's what he's doing now, but I don't hate on him. I think Munguia, Berlanga fights are solid. I have no problem with it. But the reality is, he's the one guy you can understand doesn't need to work with Turkey Al-Sheikh. Tank Davis, who's he going to fight next? Right? If he doesn't fight Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson, who's he going to fucking fight? He can't fight Isaac Cruz. He just got fucking exposed by a fucking mediocre fucking fighter. Is he going to fight the mediocre fighter? Literally, he's got no opponents. Zero. But you don't want to work with Saudi Arabia. Okay. Because they might actually put you in tough. A guy who hasn't fucking proven anything in his career yet. Great fighter, super exciting, but a guy who's cherry-picked his fucking way throughout his whole career. Tim Tszyu, he's a guy that sold his soul to the PBC. And he's going to have to fucking live with that. Because in the long run, that's going to come back and fucking bite him in the ass. Because right now what these guys see is they see that the PBC has a strong position at the 154-pound division. And because of that, they're going to try to milk it as much as they can, which means they don't need to work with Saudi Arabia. Not in the meantime. Maybe later. But right now, they already got in-house fights they can put. They can put those on pay-per-view. They don't need Saudi Arabia to do that. They can do that on their own. And they need to put out some cards of their own consistently anyway. So here you go. Bud Crawford, 154-pound fights. Spence, Funduro, Tim Tszyu, Virgil Ortiz, Charlo, right? And you got a big mix of guys you can continue to fucking set up in big matches at that weight class. And you don't need to sell your soul to Saudi Arabia in the process. But that's literally one weight class. They've had 3 fights cards this year because they just don't have enough money, the backing, the support to actually put on legitimate boxing events. All they can put out is pay-per-view, but they don't have enough fighters that are hot to put on pay-per-view at this time. That's why they put all those PBC fighters on this little California card with Bud Crawford. And these same PBC dudes that would dick ride fucking every single PBC card somehow are trying to find ways to shit on the Bud Crawford fight and the card as a whole, right? And it just shows you the ridiculousness of it. If you would have labeled it PBC and Crawford would have been fighting a PBC fighter like Funduro, they would have fucking been acting as if that was the best thing that ever happened. Like they did with Frank Martin and Tank Davis and that fucking undercard that I can't even fucking remember who was on it because it was not memorable, right? But the funny thing about this is this continuously duck of Bud Crawford. It happened at 140 pounds when Broner and fucking Danny Garcia, 2 of the top fighters at that weight, blatantly fucking ducked the hell out of Bud Crawford. Did not want anything to do with him. Nothing to do with him. Even though they could have potentially fought for undisputed. Big fights, could have justified pay-per-view. But both of them knew that if they fought Crawford, they would have got fucking destroyed. So they continue to just fight in-house PBC events, cherry-picked opponents, low risk, and they're just going to get recycled, just like fucking Danny Garcia and Erislandy Lara being recycled on the Canelo Alvarez pay-per-view card, another PBC event, right? With a bunch of recycled refugee fighters. But you guys are going to fucking buy into it, act like it's great, all because anything that's PBC, you're going to somehow fucking dick ride it. like somehow the PBC is great for boxing, but Saudi Arabia is terrible. Saudi Arabia's brought more attention to boxing this year than fucking the PBC's ever brought to boxing in its whole fucking inception. Right? That's just the truth. But let's get into this. Obviously, we got a PowerPoint here that we can discuss and look at this a little bit. So here's the man, the legend, Bud Crawford. I find it ridiculous that I even need to defend a Canelo Alvarez, that I need to defend a Ngannou, that I need to defend a Bud Crawford. Three of the best fighters, three of the top 5 fighters in boxing today, without a fucking doubt. Bud Crawford just does everything he needs to do to fucking build his legacy. Yet people continue to try to shade him, downplay him, and act like they did with Golovkin, right? That it was him, not fucking all these other dudes who purposely fucking blatantly ducked him because they knew what would happen. They would be fucking chalk outlines on the fucking ring, building his legacy while fucking ruining their marketability. And that's what this comes down to, marketability, right? So obviously we know Turki Al-Sheikh because we saw the talk about it prior to this fight card happening, right? When obviously Shakur Stevenson was at that fight the other week and was glad-handing Turki Al-Sheikh. And he was talking about how he wants to make Shakur Stevenson William Zepeda fight, which is fantastic. If Tank Davis has no interest in taking on a legitimate opponent, you might as well give Shakur a great come-forward type of an opponent like Zepeda. Zepeda is the kind of fighter who's either going to be Maidana to Broner, or the kind of guy that's going to really highlight and showcase Shakur Stevenson, kind of like Corrales for Mayweather, right? It's going to be one or the other. So regardless, it's a fantastic matchup. The other matchup, of course, was Ortiz versus Bud Crawford. On the outside looking in, this is a fight card that obviously sells in California. Mexican Zepeda, Mexican-American, fucking Virgil Ortiz, right? You know, this is the kind of card that would literally be bigger than obviously Bud Crawford's fight with Madrimov. Understandably so. Madrimov is an Eastern European, not well known in America, doesn't have an ingrained fan base. And this is why we know Virgil Ortiz got the victory yesterday, because this was the writing on the wall. Nobody wants to see Bud Crawford face Sergey Bolchak. That's not a fight that will sell. It's just another version of Bud Crawford versus Madrimov, right? So, you know, when it comes down to it, you don't need to do that again. You don't want to do that again. It's not as marketable. You know, financially, that's not the direction that they wanted to go. So they did everything in their power to make sure Virgil Ortiz got the decision that he did not deserve. And that's exactly how it unfolded. Now he's in position to get the fight with Bud Crawford. But then what does he say post-fight? Right? What does he say post-fight? His backstepping now at 154 pounds is no different than the backstepping he was doing at 147 pounds. He'd rather wait, and God knows how long he'd need to wait, for the winner of Errol Spence versus Fonduro. Like, that's a fight that God only knows when it's going to happen. Errol Spence still doesn't have a new trainer. He still isn't in training. Right? So that fight probably would be happening in 2025, which means that a potential Virgil Ortiz-Fonduro fight or Errol Spence fight would be happening when? The fourth quarter of 2025? So literally you're going to wait a whole fucking year hoping to get a big payday, even though Saudi Arabia is going to guarantee you a fucking big payday right now. And if you lose, we know they're still going to guarantee you a big payday afterwards, because that's what they do. They don't use you and then throw you fucking at the curb when you get beat in a fucking great fight that boxing fans want to see. What they do is they end up showing you love, just like Eddie Hearn consistently has done as well, by continuing to use you, put you in big fights, allowing you to earn a lot of money, win, lose, or draw. as long as you're taking on great opponents and putting up great fights, like we just saw this weekend. So I'm disappointed with Virgil Ortiz being in the ring and calling out the winner of Funduro and Spence, because for me, that's a fucking bitch move. Like, I know that you are the mandatory for the winner of that, but you don't even need to be the fucking mandatory for that. What does that mean? Like, literally, for Bud Crawford, we know he needs to be in the mix for big fights, whether it's with Ortiz, Tim Tszyu, the winner of Spence and Funduro, or Charlo coming back. And right there, you have 4 great opponents, all marketable, all fights that would do very well in the States, and all fights that American boxing fans should be fucking over the moon for. In truth, who wouldn't want to see a Virgil Ortiz-Bud Crawford fight in Texas or Vegas? Who wouldn't love to see a Tim Tszyu versus a Bud Crawford fight? You don't need to do that in Australia. Do that in Vegas. It'd be huge. It'd be a great fight. A Charlo-Bud Crawford fight. A fight that most of us were really excited about post Errol Spence. Except, of course, Charlo decided to go chase the big money against Canelo Alvarez. Or a possible rematch with Errol Spence if he's able to beat Funduro. And if not, then Funduro, another Mexican fighter versus another Black American. Another marketable fight in the States, especially in West Coast, Southern states. These are all big fights. You don't need a fucking Crawford-Canelo fight. He literally has great opponents, actually better opponents than Canelo Alvarez has at 168 pounds. More marketable opponents. Canelo is using his marketable fights right now. Berlanga, the Puerto Rican, Munguia, the Mexican. After that, who's he going to fight? Pacheco, maybe, another Mexican-American kid, but he needs to come off a big win because his last performance was disappointing. Mimbila, after beating Derevchenko, sure, but this is a French-African Cameroonian guy fighting out of Canada. Not the most marketable fucking opponent, even though that would be a fucking great fight for hardcore boxing fans. Ulysses Iglesias, the Cuban fighter, wow, another great fight. But he's Cuban, which means he don't sell. And don't get me wrong, if Canelo was to fight any of those fighters, I'd give him props. I think they're all great fights, just as good as the fights I'm talking about for Bud Crawford. The difference is the Crawford's opponents are far more marketable in the American market. So here was the post-fight interview. Turkey, Oscar De La Hoya, both being interviewed post-Ortiz's robbery victory, and both not asking for a rematch, which really should be what people are pushing for, which the WBC should be pushing for, but we know the WBC. They are just worried about getting paid, so they're not going to do that. They're going to be more than happy if Turki Al-Sheikh, Golden Boy, and DAZN end up putting on a Bud Crawford Ortiz card with Shakur and Zepeda on the undercard, right? They would be super excited about that because obviously Shakur is the WBC champion. Ortiz is a fucking email WBC champion, so they'd be getting paid fucking in both fights. They'd be stoked, super fucking stoked, right? And this is literally what the promoter and the money man were saying post-fight. But that's not what Ortiz was saying, right? So here we have a quote or like a tweet. Turki Al-Sheikh wants Crawford versus Virgil next. Virgil wants the winner of Sebastian Funduro versus Errol Spence. Two contrasting plans. And that's the thing, right? This is why Turki Al-Sheikh is sort of saying he's not interested in working with certain fighters because they're just not interested in making the fights he wants. He wanted Inui to fight MJ Akhmedov and maybe move up to 126 and fight, I don't know, somebody at that weight class. I don't know who he would think, but potentially somebody, right? He wants Canelo to fight, obviously, Benavidez and Crawford. He wants Tim Tszyu to fight Crawford. So the fact that these guys aren't interested in making the fights he's willing to pay for, he's removing himself from working with them. which is what he should do. Because why would I pay for something that I'm not interested in? I'm going to pay money, good money, to put you in fights that I, a hardcore boxing fan with deep, endless fucking supply of cash, are interested in seeing. It's kind of like when I was a kid with Ring Magazine and making up dream fights. That's what Turki Al-Sheikh is doing. The difference is he can actually get those fights done because he's actually got the money to pay for them. For me, it was just kids' fantasy. So here's some tweets. So, per the PBC, Virgil Ortiz has to see Crawford first before ever getting a fight with the winner of Funduro versus Spence. We'll see how true that is. Both just fought a week apart for each other and Funduro versus Spence hasn't even been scheduled or announced. Why chase after a ghost fight and not a standing fight? And that's the rationale behind it. Like literally, Tim Tszyu, Ortiz, and Bud Crawford are all on the same fucking schedule. So making those guys fight each other is a very easy thing. Michael Benson says, His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh and Oscar De La Hoya have both said they want to make the Terence Crawford, Virgil Ortiz, and Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda on the same card fight. And me too. What a great card that would be. I ain't a fucking hater. I ain't fucking somebody that's anti-fucking making fights that boxing fans want. I'm a boxing fan. That shit's fucking great. I mean, it's unfortunate that Virgil Ortiz doesn't deserve the fight and now looks like an easy fucking opponent for Bud Crawford. But still, nonetheless, I understand it's a marketable fight and a fight that will sell well in the States. And I'm happy to see Crawford stay busy and get big fights. And for Shakur, I'm happy for him to get a fucking legitimate contender at 135 pounds. Cross Cutchin said, robbery? Bochuk won that. I don't give a fuck what nobody says. They didn't want him to lose to mess up the Crawford versus Ortiz fight. Shake my head. That's fucking absolutely 100% a fact. The fix was in because we already know what the powers that be wanted. And it was not Bud Crawford versus Sergey Bochuk. These two guys, I like both of them. Virgil Ortiz, Tim Tszyu. I got a lot of respect for Tim Tszyu, right? You know, he's a guy that's just stepped in and taken on every fight available, always said what he had to say, unlike Virgil Ortiz, who blatantly ducked Bud Crawford at 147 pounds, and now looks like he's going to blatantly duck Bud Crawford at 154 pounds. Let's hope that shit don't happen. But as far as Tim Tszyu is concerned, this is a guy who now, which is good, he was going to do that in-house PBC bullshit fight with Erickson Lubin, right, for no title, all to put himself in position to fight for the IBF title, which didn't make fucking any sense at all to me, especially with a potential Bud Crawford fight sitting right there for you, right? You could walk right into a Bud Crawford world title fight, or you could fight Erickson Lubin to earn a fucking world title fight against a guy that couldn't sell $100 bills in fucking America for $1. Like, that's how fucking obscure Bakram Murzaliyev is. He could be selling $100 bills for $1 in America and nobody would be buying, right? Because they wouldn't know who the fuck he was and what he is doing. But Tim Tszyu, nonetheless, is getting a fight with him, which is great, smart. He can end up putting himself in better position, coming off of a loss by retaining or getting another world title, getting the IBF belt. And now you have Funduro with 2 titles. Apparently he's going to be stripped by the WBO if he doesn't face Bud Crawford. So that means Bud Crawford is going to inherit that WBO title if the WBO stays true to its word. And the WBO is pretty good that way. So I would not be surprised if that is the way it happens. I don't think Funduro is going to jump at a chance to fight Bud Crawford. So I think he's going to be stripped of his WBO title. So that means Crawford's going to be the WBA, WBO champion, with obviously IBF champion Tim Tszyu sitting right there. A guy that's one loss is kind of controversial. So I know confidence-wise he feels he's ready for the big boys. This was a guy who literally signed with Al Haymon and the PBC all to get a Charlo fight, a fight that the majority of Americans felt he would never win. Yet he didn't feel that way, and he felt confident in chasing that goal. So then, now fighting a smaller fighter, an older fighter in Bud Crawford, in a weight class where Crawford obviously doesn't look nearly as devastating as he did at 147 pounds, it would seem as if this is just a natural fight to make. But we know what he's doing. The same thing, running that PBC gauntlet, right? That's why the Lubin fight was set up to begin with. When he beats Murtazaev, who do you think he's going to fight after that? Probably fucking Lubin, right? In Australia, if Lubin doesn't fucking duck again. And then probably if he beats Lubin, look forward to him facing the winner of Spence and Funduro, right? Like the PBC is once again doing the same thing they did at 140 and 147, trying to fucking blackball Bud Crawford and not engage in fights that boxing fans literally want with a pound for pound fucking monster. A fight that if any of these guys were able to win would solidify them as fucking pound for pound fighters and build their name recognition far bigger than fighting fucking each other. Look at Charlo as an example. Charlo fought a bunch of no-name 154-pound fighters, was never able to get huge recognition because he never fought any legitimate fucking killer. None. If Ortiz, Funduro, a fucking Spence that Crawford already fucking retired, and if Tim Tszyu fight each other, what is that going to tell you? It's not going to tell you they're the best in the division, because at this point we know they're all ducking fucking Bud Crawford. So how could they ever fucking expect anyone to believe that they're the best? Especially when their goal is to fight the guy that Crawford fucking destroyed in Errol Spence. So you beat Errol Spence, you think all of a sudden you're the number one fighter at 154? Like Virgil Ortiz literally said he was the best. This guy thinks he's the best, but he's blatantly ducked Crawford in one weight division, and now is fucking attempting to duck him in a second weight division. Like that shit is fucking disgusting. Because as a young dude like him, he's not following his gut. He's not following his heart. He's being directed by his team, who's just trying to fucking suck as much money out of the sport, out of fans, by taking the lowest risk fights available. And the reality is, he's just as likely to get fucking beat by fucking Spence, Funduro, or Tim Tszyu, because in truth, they're all about the same fucking level. Not one of them is fucking elite. The only elite fighter at this division right now is Bud Crawford. And maybe Madrimov, after that fight with Crawford, is going to end up developing even more, because obviously that's a great learning fight for him. And he did not get his ass beat up like like Tim Tszyu did in the Funduro fight, and like fucking Ortiz just did against Sergey Bolchak. And saying that, and then you got Charles Conwell, who none of these guys are going to fucking fight. He's going to be fighting on their undercard fucking forever, because none of these dudes want to risk taking a fight with Charles Conwell, who's going to knock them the fuck out, but yet he's not a marketable name, and you can't fucking make big money from fighting him. It's sad, but if you left it to Turki Al-Sheikh, you wouldn't fucking have that problem. Literally, the best fights would get made. All these dudes would get fucking opportunities, just like we see currently in the heavyweight division. There's no heavyweight currently working with Saudi Arabia that's complaining and moaning about the way fights are happening, whether they win, lose, or draw. Literally, Big Baby fucking Miller just got robbed by fucking Andy Ruiz. And the first thing Turki Al-Sheikh said is, don't worry about it, man. We got you fucking covered. You got a big fight coming. No worries. We appreciate you jumping in, coming off of a loss to Daniel Dubois, and we appreciate the effort you put in today. You look great. And now you can be guaranteed to get a fucking another big fight somewhere down the line within probably the next 6 months. Because that's what happens when you tie yourself with somebody that's not just there to exploit you, but someone who's really there because of their love for the sport of boxing. And I hate to see either one of these guys come across as a fucking ducker. You know, Tim Tszyu, I never fucking caught any of that from him. And as I say, I don't think it's these dudes. I think it's their teams. The same way we've seen this shit consistently from PBC, Al Heyman controlled fighters. And I know Ortiz is a Golden Boy fighter, and he's not an Al Heyman fighter. But what he's trying to do is align himself with that PBC crew. Even though his promoter just fucking signed a deal with Saudi Arabia. Here's the current rankings. So Sergey Bochuk obviously was the email champion. Funduro is obviously the champion above him. Errol Spence, a guy who's never even fought at 154 pounds, is somehow the number one ranked fighter. I don't know how that fucking makes sense. Charles Conwell, who just won very impressively on this undercard, not against a legitimate opponent, but nonetheless, I think he should definitely move to number one above Spence. Jesus Ramos obviously needs to bounce back after his horrible performance against Lubin. And then you got Xander Zayas and Erickson Lubin there. A great top five fighters, in theory, for the WBC. WBA, you got Madrimov, who obviously just lost to Bud Crawford. Madrimov is easily number one. Ortiz is obviously number one here, but obviously he's going to walk away from that WBA position because he don't want a Bud Crawford fight. That's why he just fought Sergey Bochuk for the WBC interim title, walking away from fucking a Bud Crawford fight again. And then you got Victor Malnicki Jr., fucking straight up bum. I don't know how he's top five in anybody's fucking book, and above Tim Tszyu and Erickson Lubin number 3. Fucking the IBF, obviously Bakram Murtazaliev is going to fight Tim Tszyu, who's number 4. That's a great fight. Lubin and Tszyu were going to fight to become the mandatory for that fight. But Lubin fucking shot himself in the foot. You know, fuck that dude. He's blatantly ducked Tim Tszyu twice, all because he doesn't want to fucking be the B-side. And that's what he is, the clear-cut fucking B-side. Sebastian Funduro, the temporary WBO champion, obviously a Tim Tszyu rematch is right there. Virgil Ortiz and Xander Zayas. I definitely think Xander Zayas needs a few more fights. Maybe him and a fucking Victor Malnicki Jr. Or maybe him versus an Erickson Lubin. Or I think they're talking about him versus Josh Kelly. You can see Josh Kelly there at number 4 for the WBO and number 5 for the IBF. Josh Kelly's a good UK fighter, was part of Team GB in the Olympics, did very well. People were super stoked about him as a professional, but ended up getting knocked the fuck out by that guy that Boots Ennis just beat, Bud Crawford's ex-opponent. So, you know, that was basically the beginning and the end of his pro career. Nobody ever looks at him too serious after that. But it is what it is. You know, the 154-pound division is stacked. You got a lot of great fighters. I didn't even mention most of them, just looking at the top 5 by those rankings. But it just makes me scratch my head that you're going to see YouTubers here in glee, happy at the prospect of Bud Crawford being ducked. Because these guys, for some reason, and many of them Black American boxing fans that support Black American fighters, yet they're going to be continuously still shitting on Bud Crawford, downplaying and moaning on his fucking poor pay-per-view sales. But then you talk about supporting Black fighters and shitting on his resume, happy and gleeful that the PBC is going out of their way to blackball you and not allow you to get big fights, which are just going to help continue to build your legacy as one of the best fighters of our era. But these people call themselves boxing fans. And I know this isn't just Black Americans. Obviously, now with Virgil Ortiz's performance, piss poor, you're going to have tons of Mexicans and Mexican Americans fucking capping like crazy. And we've already seen it after yesterday's performance, trying to, you know, downplay it. These are the same people that before the fight actually happened, all felt very confident that he was going to beat Bud Crawford. Only because he's a Mexican American like them. Not based on anything he's done recently. Because what has he done recently? Lost 2 years of his career and fight 2 fucking journeyman bums who weren't even legitimate 154-pound fighters at a fucking higher catch weight. Literally not proving fucking anything. That's why going into this fight, people were legitimately concerned about his health and how that was going to play out. No different than people were concerned about Errol Spence's health. Right? This is called consistency. This is called being a sports fan, not having agendas override fucking everything else, understanding that people's health is important, and it's something that we have to consider when these fights get made, right? I saw people talking post-fight, oh, the reason he didn't look so great is probably because of his health. But you weren't saying that 2 days before the fight when you were criticizing Bud Crawford for his poor performance, even though I don't think he was poor. I thought he won convincingly versus Madrimov. And I like Madrimov. So I'm not here shitting on a fighter all to hype up a fighter I like. I like Crawford. I like Madrimov. I know what was going to happen because I know who was better. And it played out not quite the way I thought, but pretty similar, right? Madrimov ended up losing the same way Canelo lost to Floyd. He tried to literally fight Bud Crawford's fight, and that was never going to work. And hopefully, like Canelo Alvarez, he's going to learn from this fight because it's a great learning fight. Being in with Bud Crawford in that kind of fucking technical chess match, right? He can only get better moving forward. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if any of these guys are interested in facing Madrimov. I think Sergey Bolchak will, and he'll get knocked out. Tim Tszyu, Ortiz, Fortuna or Funduro, Spence. I don't think any of those dudes are fucking going to be chasing him. But, this is my opinion, my perspective as a boxing fan. I'm not pushing a narrative. I'm pushing truth. What are you pushing? That's the question you should ask yourself. Because as a real boxing fan, why would you hate on Turki Al-Sheikh helping the sport of boxing? All the fanboy for the PBC who's literally giving you 3 fight cards this year, all pay-per-view. That's impressive. And I ain't hating on the PBC because in 2024, I stated on numerous occasions the PBC was by and far the best promotional company that year, putting on all the best fights. Obviously, the other promotional companies had their share of good fights, but in comparison, DAZN was terrible last year. Top Rank's consistently good, but not great because they won't go above and beyond. Golden Boy was, as they are now, mediocre at best. PBC was dominant, putting out great fights that boxing fans wanted to see, even though some of them we had to wait quite a while to finally get to have happen and unfold. But they also worked with other promotional companies to give us good fights as well. So hats off to the PBC in 2024. In 2025, they've done sweet fuck all. And now getting our 4th fight card of the year, a Canelo card, which is just stacked full of fucking straight up garbage. I can't say I'm excited about that. And I support Canelo. But supporting Canelo and fucking being a liar, that's completely different. If I'm going to be critical of fucking fight cards that I think are fucking subpar, then I'm going to be critical of that one too, because I believe it is subpar. Oh, some Japanese fight cards happened today, last night. But let me see this while I'm here. I know I talked about it on my live, but let's just chop it up here and now. So Canelo Alvarez facing Edgar Berlanga. I'm not shitting on the Edgar Berlanga fight. I think hungry, young Puerto Rican fighter after fighting hungry, young Mexican. These are the kind of fights people always ask Canelo to take. But now that he's taking them, now they're cherry picks because he's not getting David Benavidez. My question is, who's David Benavidez going to fight next? I guarantee you it's probably going to be somebody worse than fucking Edgar Berlanga. Who's Tank Davis going to fight next? I guarantee you it's probably going to be somebody worse than fucking Berlanga. And people will be okay with that because they're full of shit. But here's this card. So, Canelo Berlanga, the best fight on the card. Lara Garcia, more fucking retread fighters from the PBC stable. Old fighters who've been there for a long time. Nobody literally fucking gives a shit about either one of them. Literally, Arislandy's a champion at 160. Nobody knows and nobody cares. Nobody knows who's he fought since he moved to the division. If he really wanted to do something, he'd be fighting Carlos Adames to unify. As far as Danny Garcia, whatever. Caleb Plant versus Trevor McCumbee. So it's okay for Caleb Plant to fight a straight up bum, but Canelo Alvarez fighting Berlanga is he should be criticized. But didn't Canelo Alvarez already knock out Caleb Plant? Stephen Fulton finally coming back. I mean, Inui's had 3 fights in the meantime. This is Fulton's first fight. He's fighting Carlos Castro, a solid opponent. Obviously, Castro 30-2, 14 knockouts, stopped once, right? Back-to-back losses in 2022. Got beat by split decision by Luis Neri, who just got knocked out by Inui, and then got stopped by Brandon Figueroa in 6 rounds, right? After that, he went on and beat 3 mediocre fighters, and now is facing Stephen Fulton. So for Fulton, it's a good opponent at his second weight division. But we saw what Funduro did to him. So if he's going to measure up to Funduro, he should equally be able to dominate and destroy this guy in a similar fashion. And then you have Rolly Romero against a dude that I've never fucking heard of. Rolly Romero, coming off of a knockout loss to fucking Isaac Cruz. He's fighting Manuel James, a guy who is 16-1-1 with 11 KOs, a guy that looks just as fucking stupid and ridiculous as Rolly Romero himself. So that fight, as far as people hating both of them and hoping they both get knocked out, that's probably the best thing going on. He literally lost to a guy in 2022 who was 8-1-2. His resume is fucking mediocre at best. Even Rolly Romero's resume is better than his. This clown. 15-2, both times knocked the fuck out. Should have lost to fucking Ismael Barasa as well. So literally should have 3 losses in a row. Lost to Jackson Moranis back in 2020, but was given the fucking decision, even though everyone that watched the fight knows that he got outboxed. Like, it's a mediocre card at best. It's a card where they're trying to push the Latin American fucking narrative, right? That's what they're trying to push. You got Fulton on that card, but Fulton is a throwaway fight. You owe him a fight because he's part of your promotional company, so you throw him on this card. And then, of course, you got Danny, Canelo, Berlanga, 2 Puerto Ricans on that card, right? Rolly. You know, I'm not excited about it. But I don't mind the Berlanga fight. Berlanga is a tough kid, big, physically he's way bigger. Wait till they do their face-off. Berlanga is going to look like a giant towards Canelo Alvarez, right? Not that means he's going to win the fight, but for casual boxing fans with a Mexico-Puerto Rican fucking storyline, it's a fight that's marketable. It makes sense. You can understand why they're doing it. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. I mean, don't come here trying to justify fucking Virgil Ortiz winning, because there's no way you can fucking convince me Virgil Ortiz earned fucking 8 rounds in that fight. No chance, no way, no fucking how. But leave your comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Peace out.